Like when I used to be in the SEO business back in the day, I would always say this to clients, and it's true. I would say, they'd say, well, can you guarantee that we're number one in Google? I'm like, yes, if I can pick the search term. Right?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So going viral, quote unquote, has neither good or bad characteristics. It's just something that happens. Not to mention the fact, one of the things that we talk about in the book is that going viral is not the same thing as a word of mouth strategy. Going viral is
True.
buying a lottery ticket, right? It's a recipe of hope.
Hello and welcome to the Right Podcast. I'm your host, Julie McCoy. Join me as I interview experts in the field and discuss hot content, copywriting, and marketing topics. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to episode 40 in the Right Podcast. Today, I have the honor of having Baer on as my guest. Jay is the founder of Convince and Convert, a Hall of Fame keynote speaker, and the best-selling author of 6 books. Jay's new book, Talk Triggers, co-written with Daniel Lemon, comes out October 2nd, and it's October 1st as we're recording this. I already have my copy, which I pre-ordered. It came with a llama, cookies, and headband, and I have to say, Jay, my toddler loved that llama. Like, that's all we've been talking about in our house.
Thank you. It is actually, not to be pedantic, but it is actually an alpaca. And so many people have asked us about the difference. No, it's quite all right. So many people have asked us, like, what exactly is the difference between a llama and an alpaca? That Daniel and I have created a series of blog posts and videos to describe the difference that we'll be publishing
Okay,
later.
I need to go find
Yes,
those.
we'll be publishing them later this week. But yeah, it was just fun and kind of a random kind of occurrence. You know, we had a draft book cover which we didn't like very well. And Daniel and I said, this book is about word of mouth, so maybe it shouldn't just be a regular, traditional, kind of boring book cover. And we were just kind of messing around, and he found this photograph of 2 alpacas seeming to whisper to one another. And we mocked up a book cover with that image on it and sent it to the publisher thinking, oh, yeah, they're going to say this is ridiculous. They're like, great, do it. We're like, seriously? They're like, yeah. And so now it's become sort of our mascot and our talisman for this book, Talk Triggers, and all the promotional materials for the book include alpacas, and the website, talktriggers.com, includes a lot of alpacas. And now people keep sending me alpacas. So it was my birthday a couple of days ago, and about 92% of all birthday gifts received were alpaca themed. So, it's kind of like a be careful what you wish for sort of
I bet. Well, hey, now I get to teach my 4-year-old the difference between a llama and a alpaca. So that comes in handy.
Content marketing. Really is. Yeah, it's all good.
That's awesome. Well, she's really into animals right now, and, we're learning the difference. And it's so funny, like when you look at a book as an adult full of animals, I'm like, oh, wait, is that an otter or is that some other kind of mammal? I'm realizing.
Because you're not rolling around looking at otters very often, right? Or is it a sea otter or a river otter, which are quite different.
Exactly. So different.
Actually, you should grab her and go on YouTube. There are videos of alpacas making noise, and alpacas hum when they communicate.
Wow.
And they're quite like, and it's really interesting. So that's a good video to look up.
Oh my gosh. Yes. We will be doing that when she comes home from school today.
Yep.
That's awesome. Well,
that's it, right? Show's over. We've done the alpaca trivia, and that's the end of that's all our time together.
Exactly.
So thank you.
Yeah, that's what we could title this episode. Alpaca trivia with Baer. Hey, it's a great talk trigger.
It was funny. Now, in retrospect, you're right. And what happened was, as is typically the case, we wrote the book and then created the cover. But if we had done it contemporaneously, what we absolutely would have done, because it would have been hilarious and also befitting the theme of the book, had a section in the middle, like a 2 or 3 page section, which is just, so what is the difference between an alpaca and a llama, and like alpaca trivia and the whole thing? We totally would have done that next time.
Oh, that's
the next print.
Yeah, next edition. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I will buy that second copy just for my toddler.
There you go.
That's awesome. Well, I wanted to start out talking about, I was reading through the 2018 Word of Mouth report, which is a really awesome report. Definitely go and get that from Jay Baer's website, Talk Triggers. And this statistic really stuck out to me. 83% of Americans say that a word of mouth recommendation from a friend or family member makes them more likely to purchase that product or service. And that kind of blew me away because, I thought it was around 60, 70, maybe 80, but 83%, that's a huge percentage. So for the first question about this topic, word of mouth marketing, Jay, can you tell us a little bit more, just a recap about why word of mouth matters so much to businesses today, especially considering that finding in your study?
Well, as you said, it is quite common that individuals make purchase decisions based on recommendations from friends, either face-to-face or in social media. And I think it's partially because more than ever, we are besieged by options, especially in the United States, right? There's so many things we could buy. There's so many competitors for every conceivable product or service that when somebody, even if somebody you don't know, says, amongst all these different options, here's one that I recommend and here's why, it just carries a lot of persuasive weight. Now, I suspect, I don't have data on this, but I suspect that while word of mouth has always been important, since the first caveman sold a rock to another caveman, and third caveman was like, dude, this guy's got the best rocks. I mean, we have to remember that word of mouth marketing was marketing for a number of years. It was all we had, right? And then somebody, painted a logo on a cave or something, and that was the first billboard. But for a long time, that's all we had was word of mouth. But I feel like now in this developed economy where we have so many choices and everything moves so quickly that somebody just giving us a tip makes such a difference. I'll give you a first-person example. A couple of weeks ago, I was on Facebook, and my friend Tom Webster from Edison Research made a little post about a book called Boomtown by Sam Anderson, which is an unbelievable book. It is one of the best books I've read in a really long time. And it's all about the history of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and its conflicting stories and narratives about its founding and its basketball team, and it's just really exceptional. Wow. If you like Bill Bryson, that author, or Eric Larson, it is sort of in that vein. So anyway, there are so many books that you could choose from. So if somebody says, what, of all the books out there, this is a book that I really recommend, I'm like, well, heck, I'm absolutely going to take you up on that. So that the variety of options, as the variety of options increases, the persuasive notion of word of mouth increases accordingly because you have so many choices that you have to sift through. I mean, I think right now you also see this in television, right? How often are you just stymied by the number of Netflix shows that there are? And you're like, oh my God, I can't even sort out how many, I can't decide what to watch, right? It's like, you may know the researcher and author Barry Schwartz, who wrote a very terrific book, The Paradox of Choice. And we are so living in a paradox of choice world right now that word of mouth becomes more important because we just need help to make a decision.
Wow. That's a great point. Well, I love the examples that you give in your book about brands who are creating talk triggers. The Cheesecake Factory, their menu, the screenshots you took and placed in your book of tweets just going out about the menu. I think one woman said, let's go to the place that has that menu. And her husband was like, that's the Cheesecake Factory, right? So exactly. I love that example. So thinking of, those talk triggers, here's another question for you. What's the difference between a talk trigger and a unique selling proposition or a USP?
Yeah. So a talk trigger, as we define it in the book, is a operational differentiator that compels word of mouth. So it's not really marketing. It's something that you do different that creates a marketing advantage. It's something that your customers don't necessarily expect. And so when they come across, they're like, wow, that's pretty interesting. I feel like I have to tell somebody else about that. A USP can be similar, but it's usually sort of a different way of doing things, not a different thing that you do. And the better way to explain it is a talk trigger is all about getting your customers to tell stories to one another. Cheesecake Factory. I go to a Cheesecake Factory. I tell you a story about, you wouldn't believe how big this menu is. It took me 45 minutes to order. That's a story, right?
Right.
So a talk trigger is a story that customers tell at a bar. A unique selling proposition is a bullet point that people discuss in a boardroom. They're definitely similar, but a talk trigger is much more, supposed to be much more interesting and gets passed along more because it's just a more dynamic way of talking about your experience.
Love that. That really cuts to the heart of what that is. I think that's a great explanation. So you can't buy word of mouth marketing. So what are some ways that marketers can get a conversation started creatively about their brand? What are some ways you would recommend doing that?
I mean, that's sort of the whole point of the book, really, is to say, look, everybody understands at some level that word of mouth is important. I don't think there's anybody who's going to say, no, we don't really care what customers say.
Right.
So we all know it's important. Yet, here's the part that's crazy. Nobody has an actual strategy for it. Like nobody, right? So everybody in business has a desk full of strategies, right? You might have a marketing strategy, a content marketing strategy, social media strategy, PR strategy, crisis management strategy, HR and recruiting strategy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But nobody has a word of mouth strategy, despite the fact that word of mouth influences between 50 and 91% of all purchases. Okay, so between half and all of the money that you have is influenced by word of mouth, yet nobody has a strategy. We do word of mouth on accident. Some do it well, some do it poorly, but we all do it on accident. What we try to do with this book, Talk Triggers, is give people a system that they can use to do word of mouth on purpose. So that's really the key, is to say, all right, we're going to engineer a differentiator that people will talk about. Now, the key to that is making sure that you understand that same is lame. In business, we tend to play follow the leader. We say, well, who's really good at XYZ in our industry? Let's kind of mimic them. That's safe. But that doesn't create conversations. Competency doesn't create conversations.
So true.
We discuss things that are different and we ignore things that are average. That's just how we're wired as humans. So the key to the Talk Triggers approach is to understand what your customers expect and then do one thing they definitely don't expect. And that difference becomes your talk trigger.
I love that. That is amazing. Well, my next question for you, I am so excited to hear your thoughts because I get this question a lot in our content agency. And I think sometimes the response can be like all over the board. So the question I have for you is, going viral a good or not so good goal for a business?
It's neither. It's neither. I think because what is the net present value of going viral? It depends. Right. So, awareness doesn't equal money.
Yeah, so true.
Reach doesn't equal leads. There's not a linear relationship between those two. If the goal is just to go viral, I can make that happen. If I can choose what going viral is about, I'll manufacture a crisis. I'll rent an elephant and walk it into your conference room. There's lots of things that I can do. It used to be like when I used to be in the SEO business back in the day, I would always say this to clients, and it's true. They'd say, well, can you guarantee that we're number one in Google? I'm like, yes, if I can pick the search term. Right? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So going viral, quote unquote, has neither good or bad characteristics. It's just something that happens. Not to mention the fact, one of the things that we talk about in the book is that going viral is not the same thing as a word of mouth strategy. Going viral is buying a lottery ticket, right? It's a recipe of hope. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. There's lots of case studies of viral successes out there, but it's not a repeatable strategy. The point of a talk trigger is to have an operational difference that creates word of mouth every day forever. Viral creates a bunch of word of mouth on one day. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it's just not a strategy. It's not repeatable. It's not replicatable. So they can work side by side, but it's important to recognize that talk triggers and the talk trigger system is not a system for going viral. It's a system for using word of mouth to acquire customers, using your existing customers as the medium for doing so.
That's a great analysis. I like what you said about how going viral may bring you success, but it could be just for a day versus word of mouth marketing. A long-term strategy there can make a huge difference for a long period of time. And I think like whenever we hear, oh, I want to go viral, and that's a goal, that's equated to, oh, viral equals sales. Viral equals traffic, which is going to lead to sales. And that's so not often true, because going viral, while you get those stats, those numbers, you have tons of eyeballs on your content, that may not equal sales.
Yeah, and usually, when you go viral, it's about whatever that kind of blip is, whatever that weird thing is. Whereas with a talk trigger, the idea is that a customer says to another customer, hey, I went to Doubletree Hotels and they gave me a warm chocolate chip cookie when I checked in. It was one of the best cookies I've ever had. Right. So it's not quite the same as a referral or a recommendation. Say you have to stay at Doubletree, but it's got more structure to it. The recommendation has more structure to it than going viral, which is typically a little bit more loose and sort of out there in the ether.
Yes. Awesome. Well, I wanted to ask you next, what are some ways that brands can get closer to their customers, thinking about building up loyalty and a real connection? What are some methods you would recommend?
It's a critical part about this system. It's one of the things that Daniel Lemon and I are so passionate about as it relates to talk trigger creation and word of mouth strategy. The challenge with this system is that people will read about it, they'll hear a presentation about it from Daniel or I, and they'll say, all right, what we've got to do is get together, we got to get everybody in a conference room and let's have a brainstorm and figure out our talk trigger. And I'm like, no, because if it was that easy, you'd already have one, right? If it was if it was only about spending time on it, you'd already have it, right? And the reality is that most of these types of programs are led by marketers. The truth, though, is that marketing doesn't know what customers want.
Wow.
We pretend we do. We fool ourselves into thinking that we do, but we don't, because marketing very rarely interacts with customers per se. At least today. Now, back in the day, that wasn't true. I'm old enough to remember the previous era when we didn't have all this software and all these reports and all these tools and SaaS platforms. And when I was an intern, I was like 17 or something, my boss at the first marketing agency I worked with way back in the 1980s said to me, always remember this: no good marketing happens at your desk.
Wow.
He believed that if you were a strategist, you should not be in the office. You should be out visiting clients and talking to our clients' customers, because that's where you find insights. And we've kind of flipped the script on that. I think today most marketers are surrounded by data, but starved for insights. And it's partially because we don't actually talk to customers. Sales talks to customers. Customer service talks to customers. But marketing really doesn't, not in most companies. So what we want to do in this talk triggers creation process, and we talk about it in the book, is interview customers. We usually recommend interviewing a group of new customers, and a group of long-term customers, and a group of lost customers, and asking them, all right, at each of the different touch points that you had with our business, what did you expect would happen? Because again, when you know what somebody expects, when you know what they expect, you know what they don't expect. And what they don't expect becomes your talk trigger. So you almost take a customer journey map and lay on top of it expectations. And that becomes the raw materials. But that is a much better way of doing this than everybody get in a conference room and we'll order pizza and come up with something fun.
Yes, that's a great explanation. Well, one other thing I came across in your book, I'm just loving it. And everything we're talking about with Jay is definitely in this book. So go get your copy of Talk Triggers if you're listening to this episode.
Thank you. I agree. And I would say that the book itself has a talk trigger, as you may have noticed on the back. The back of the book says in big giant letters, satisfaction guaranteed. If you bought this book and didn't like it, go to talktriggers.com and send the authors a note. That's me. They will buy you any other book of your liking, and we will. So if you buy the book and you don't like it, and you want, like, I don't know, a first edition Bible, we'll see what we can do.
Oh, that's amazing.
there is no risk whatsoever to buy this book. If you don't like it, we will pay you back. So there's literally no reason to not buy it.
Oh, I love that. I just turned over my copy of the book and I see that. And you have it in a cal out with the alpaca. Great job.
Of course.
That is awesome. So one thing I was coming across in the book that I wanted to ask you while I have you on my podcast, because I think this is a great point. What is the difference between a fan and an advocate?
I'm not certain I am 1,000% clear on that. And I think different people would have different definitions. But as I think about it, advocacy is a verb. Fan is a noun. So if you are a fan, you are somebody who disproportionately likes something, a company, a team, product. An advocate is somebody who takes that like and acts upon it and goes out of their way to use your own social capital and your own time to promote that business, that product, that team to others. So fan is a passive construct. An advocate is an active construct. So all advocates are fans, but not all fans are advocates.
That's a really good differentiation point. So would you say whenever, let's say, a marketer has a...
I'm glad you say that because I literally just made that up. So I'm glad you like.
No, that was a great way to define both of those.
Good. I might have to write that down and make a blog post on that.
You should. You'll have to link to this episode. This is where I said it first.
I'll do it. That's it. This is where I on the fly uncovered this difference. I like it. Good question. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that's a really great point. So whenever, let's say a brand has a goal of, building up that fan base, would it be a better goal of going and seeking brand advocates?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, of course. Because a fan is just a number. Like a fan, like let's say you're a nightclub, okay? And you have a capacity of 300 people, small nightclub. Well, if you get 300 people in there, you're like, yeah, awesome. We've got 300 people here. That doesn't mean any of them bought drinks.
So true.
Like you have 300 people there and lose your ass, right? So it's all about behavior, not just showing up. So, I mean, would you rather have fans than not have fans? Of course. But that's only true because we assume that some percentage of fans will become advocates and will will give us money or both. So you absolutely want to focus on behavior, not just fan. I've written some posts about this. I say, don't just collect fans like baseball cards. It doesn't, you just have a collection.
Right.
That doesn't mean anything. So you have to give them assignments. You have to activate behaviors. That's why when businesses just have fans of their page or whatever, that doesn't really matter. If you turn that into a community of some sort where you can actually kind of throw some gas on that fire and get people to buy stuff or tell their friends or what have you, now you got something. Now you have something worth money.
Yes. I feel like that's so much harder to build up to today, with all the noise out there, with all of the brands fighting for attention. It's so much harder to earn that trust and that advocate. It
can be for sure. And I think the premise that is harder from a standing start is true. But that's why, in our estimation, you need a talk trigger, right? You need something that you do different that turns fans into advocates, that turns a passive customer into a talkable customer. Or a talking customer, that somebody says, hey, I went to this restaurant and before I paid, they said, pick a card and I got a joker and my whole meal was free, which is one of the case studies in the book from Skip's Kitchen in Sacramento, California. That person is going to tell that story in a way that somebody who said, I went to a hamburger restaurant and I got a patty melt. No one's going to tell that story. There's nothing there, right? So that's why we feel like when you have a talk trigger, when you have something different that you do, it really helps turn fans into advocates because it gives them a story to tell. The whole point of this book is to say, you need to give your customers a consistent story to tell, and here's what that story should be.
Yes. So that story can really give you that edge that you need to cut through the clutter and then earn that advocate.
I mean, nobody's going to talk about you just because they went there. Like, right. I don't know everybody. I mean, I'm sure I know some of your listeners, but I know this for sure. For sure, I know this. Nobody listening right now has ever said, hey, let me tell you about this perfectly adequate experience I just had.
Yes.
Like, nobody says that, right? Why? Because it's a crappy story, right? It's a story that has no point to it. It's not worth the time it took to tell the story. So we will tell stories. Your customers will tell stories. You just have to give them a story to tell. And that's what your talk trigger is, right? That's that special thing that you do that they don't expect.
Yes. Well, definitely recommend getting your book, because one thing
Thanks.
I love is all of the examples you give of that. Like, that is what speaks to me is, okay, how can I see this in action? And you have so many examples in the book, which I love.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks. We worked really hard on that. And we also, Daniel and I, were very cognizant of making sure that the case studies in the book, and there's 30, I think, or 29.
Wow.
Represent all quadrants. So there's small business examples, there's big business examples, there's B2C examples, there's B2B examples, there's American examples, there's global examples. So what we didn't want is somebody to read the book and say, yeah, I like this book, but it doesn't work for me, or that doesn't apply to me, because talk triggers and creating customers with word of mouth absolutely applies to whoever reads it. But we wanted to make sure that we had examples that also represented as many different business scenarios as possible, so that people couldn't say, well, this doesn't resonate with me. So we were very specific and spent a lot of time figuring out the right mixture of case studies to sort of almost play bingo, right? To cover all the spaces on the bingo card.
Yes. And that's another reason why you're one of my favorite speakers at Content Marketing World. And I've loved your blog for years because of how you approach that. You know, you make it relatable to everyone that needs that advice and needs that help. So yes,
thank you.
Definitely recommend getting a copy of Talk Triggers. And thank you so much for coming on the Right Podcast, Jay. I really enjoyed this.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I enjoyed it as well. TalkTriggers.com for all the stuff. And like I said, if you buy the book, you don't like it, we'll buy you any other book you want.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode with the amazing Jay Baer. Definitely go grab your copy of Talk Triggers, Jay Baer's new book, The Complete Guide to Creating Customers with Word of Mouth. It's October, and now is the season for things like product updates, book launches, you name it. When it comes to marketing, this is the season to be doing more of it. So if you need content, my agency, Express Writers, would love to help. We have over 95 writers, experts in all kinds of industries that I've personally picked and trained in best SEO content writing practices. You can visit our content shop and see our prices at expresswriters.com/content-shop. Use code WRITEPODCAST at checkout to save 10% on your next order. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit that subscribe button in iTunes. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.